Welcome to Noisecutter.
And welcome everyone to this episode of the Noisecutter Podcast. I'm your host, Rex Chatterjee. So again, this is a readout of an issue of the Noisecutter Newsletter that was published in late Jan, early Feb. I can get you the exact date. It was published on Jan 31, 2024, and it concerns the attack on Tower 22. It's being recorded now March 3rd, 2024, and so it's been a month or so since the attack. But for the sake of giving those who'd rather listen than read a chance to access this content, we are doing these delayed readouts, and the readouts will come closer to the time of publication of future issues of the Noisecutter Newsletter. For the archive and to make sure you get the latest issues of the Noisecutter Newsletter, go to noisecutter.substack.com and you can subscribe for free there. Okay, so if there's anything that's true of writing about geopolitics in the Middle East, it's a humbling experience. And so I've talked, recently and written recently about the Red Sea crisis, the Gaza crisis, and so on and so forth. And, I keep saying, yeah, look, I don't know where it's going to spill over. And again, one place I did not see it spilling over into is Jordan. So let's get into it. On January 28th, 2024, an unmanned suicide drone attacked a U.S. base in Jordan, killing 3 service members and wounding 40. The attacked base is called Tower 22, and it's a small installation in what's called the tri-border region of Jordan, Syria, and Iraq. Tower 22 is part of a network of U.S. installations in the region, both in Jordan and elsewhere, which exist primarily for the purpose of combating the ongoing threat posed by ISIS in the region. So, who done it, right? Who attacked the Tower 22 base? And if you think ISIS, it's actually wrong. If you think Iran, you're right, sort of. But the DoD has confirmed that it's an Iran-backed militia, and they suspect at that point, and it's been all but confirmed, that it is the Kataib Hezbollah, commonly referred to as KH. But who are these guys? So from the outset, it's important to distinguish KH from what we commonly know as Hezbollah. Hezbollah was formed in Lebanon in the 1980s in the wake of the 1982 Lebanon War and is primarily concerned with the affairs of Lebanon and the conflict in southern Lebanon versus Israel. KH, on the other hand, is a much newer organization founded in 2003 in Iraq after the U.S. invasion. The goal is the creation of an Iran-aligned Iraq, and to this end, they've actually fought against ISIS. So that's complicated. And this hardly paints them in any sort of favorable light, however, as their actions during the Iraqi insurgency, roughly from 2007 onwards, led to a number of U.S. coalition and civilian casualties. However, the one incident that kind of sticks out, at least, to me in my mind, it wasn't casualty related at all, but it was rather the hacking of unencrypted video feeds of U.S. Predator drones above Iraq back in late 2009. That made the news, and you might remember that happening because it was kind of like a head smack, like the video feeds off the drones are unencrypted, but sure enough, and Kataib Hezbollah were the one to actually hack those feeds. So anyway, so it was likely that KH was the ones that were behind the Tower 22 attack. I think at the time of this recording, it's been more or less confirmed. And the attack was definitely Iran sponsored. And so now we're left with the gaping question of why. Right? Getting to the bottom of that is going to be tough to do succinctly or in kind of short format, but I'm going to make a try of it. So let's start with Syria. Syria has been in a state of civil war since early 2011 when protests against the government of Bashar al-Assad hit a boiling point. Assad has been a thorn in the side of the U.S. and other Western countries and their GCC, Gulf Cooperative, the the Gulf states, forget what the GCC actually stands for, allies for a while now. And for a while at that point in 2011. And so these nations supported the newly formed rebel forces such as the Free Syrian Army. Excuse me. Now, Assad wasn't without international support either, though, and the Syrian government received military and other aid from Iran and Russia, and the latter, quite significantly, to help crush the rebellion. Now, without going too far into this, what I'm trying to convey here is that Syria was and still is absolute chaos. And chaos is fertile ground for terrorists. So while all that was going on, in 2014, ISIS made great strides in seizing and holding territory, mostly in eastern Syria and western Iraq. These kind of places touch, right? The U.S. government, of course, wouldn't stand for that, and so it launched an aerial bombing campaign against ISIS as part of, acronym upcoming, CJTFOIR, or what we'll refer to here as Operation Inherent Resolve, right? So Inherent Resolve continues through today as ISIS also continues to pose a regional threat. Vital to Operation Inherent Resolve are various military installations in the tri-border region, including, and perhaps most importantly, Al-Tanf, which is inside Syria. Now, bases located inside hostile countries and war zones need to be supplied, and ideally supplied from installations that are not inside war zones and in places that are allied with the U.S. So one such place, right, one such base is Tower 22, which is within the borders of U.S. allied Jordan. So are things starting to make a little bit more sense about what happened? Just wait. Just wait. And there's a map in the newsletter issue, and I'll link it in the show notes, of exactly what I'm talking about. So with a visual, it's kind of much easier to understand, what the tri-border is, how close to the actual tri-border all of this is. And it just kind of gives you a picture of kind of what happened. Okay. So starting in the fall of 2023, in the wake of the Hamas attack on Israel and in the ensuing Gaza conflict, U.S. forces in the tri-border region have come under repeated attacks from Iran-backed militias, including, very prominently, KH. The recent attack, while a big news item at present, is really just the latest in a string of incidents, some more successful for their perpetrators than others. The deaths of 3 U.S. service members certainly adds to the pressure of the U.S. government on the U.S. government to take decisive action against Iran, and certainly KH, but it's not as though this pressure is new or of any kind of sudden onset. It's also easy to get muddled up here, right? Given the timing coming relatively shortly after the Houthi attack on merchant and U.S. naval assets in the Red Sea, the tactics deployed, an unmanned suicide drone, the underlying state sponsor, Iran. It's easy to sort of connect the dots to indicate a clear escalation by Iran that would warrant an escalation in response by the U.S. And I think kind of being accurate with the analysis here requires a lot of information to which the general public doesn't really have access, right? Like intercepts, intelligence work product, etc. And so it's tough from our standpoint to say whether the latest attack was something of a fluke success by KH and by Iran by proxy, or by a step up in really was indicative of a step up in capabilities, tactics, and strategy by KH and really Iran. It's likely all hands, or it was at that point, all hands at the DIA and the wider U.S. and coalition intelligence community until that all kind of gets figured out or got figured out. All right, so what's next, right? Do we just kind of rip off the Band-Aid and enter into an open state of conflict with Iran? Probably not, right? For one, as Jason Lyons pointed out on an episode of the Team House podcast, I've got that linked. The one country that has a history of going into Iran and getting stuff done, Israel, is a little tied up with something at the moment, right? I'm not sure what the Israeli appetite is for a conflict with Iran at the moment, given the ongoing conflict in Gaza. But I doubt Israel will soon forget, right, that it was Iran behind the Hamas attack on October 7th. I do wonder if Israel being tied up in Gaza factored into the Iranian calculus in supporting the attacks in the Red Sea, in the tri-border region, etc., at this particular point in time, and I suspect the answer is yes. However, on the other hand, the U.S. certainly doesn't need Israeli support to escalate against Iran, and so Israel's potential unavailability at the moment isn't really dispositive of anything. Concerning a different U.S. ally in the region, my first take upon hearing of the incident, and I recited this only to my wife while driving through a snowstorm coming back from Vermont, was about how this would affect the relationship dynamics between the U.S. and Jordan, with at least overt responsibility for providing security to U.S. forces operating on its soil. Jordan has likely found itself in the hot seat, initially adopting the shaggy defense, and I've got that linked for all of you younger folks out there who might not know what I'm talking about. An official government spokesperson for Jordan tried to claim that the fatal attack on U.S. troops took place in Syria and not inside Jordan. I'll complete the footnote here. The shaggy defense, for all those who don't know that term, is "it wasn't me." And if you need pointing for that reference, one, you must be a younger millennial or younger, and two, click on that link in the newsletter and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But let's move on. So once details emerged and maps got circulated, the Jordanians had to walk back that one, right? It was very clear that Tower 22 inside Jordan. Fine. So now Jordan's been a longtime ally of the U.S. in the region, but it's not hard to imagine that Jordan, for its own interest, is wary of outright war with Iran, right? That wouldn't be great. And furthermore, the Jordanian government has recently been vocal in asking the U.S. to increase its anti-missile security posture within the country, specifically requesting the deployment of Patriot air defense systems, Patriot missiles. So maybe the pressure kind of cuts both ways here. When asked whether the U.S. would respond, President Biden has indicated yes, without providing any further details. So for right now, it's just a matter of, kind of waiting and seeing, at least as of the time this was written in January. Okay. And so that is the Tower 22 story. And there's a couple of bonus hits in this issue of the newsletter as well. I typically don't read those out into the podcast readout. Unfortunately for those, I want you guys to go click on the newsletter, read it. If you find my stuff helpful, subscribe, noisecutter.substack.com. And subscribe on YouTube for the podcast and on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get podcasts, for these readouts and for also unique podcast content, such as discussions and interviews that I host with various people who have something to add on a topic that's currently at stake. But for this one, there is a bonus take on social media hazards that I am going to read out because I just think it's kind of that important. And so Congress in January, in a rare display of bipartisan cooperation, just finished at that point raking various social media company executives over the coals because of the dangers posed by social media to children and teenagers. And so I felt sort of strange, right, watching it all happen. On one hand, the stories of what the affected families have been through was horrible, right? Just horrible. But on the other hand, the whole thing felt like kind of what I imagined Congress would have felt like, just before enacting prohibition, or maybe, directly in the throes of the Red Scare. To me, social media is a real double-edged sword. For example, for marketing purposes, social media has been great. It's been a great democratizing force between large and small companies, giving the small guys the opportunity to reach a wide audience without needing the budget of a large company. On the other hand, cyberbullying has led to child and teen suicides in a way that analog, or like the old school bullying, perhaps, didn't, right? And, apparently kids are using Snapchat to buy drugs. That didn't even realize that was possible. And maybe that just makes me old, right? And kind of out of touch, but did not see that coming. But okay. Putting the political media stunt of this hearing aside, what does Congress actually intend to do about the issue, and kind of what can it do? And what might a social media law or regulation even look like? Okay. So technically, under the terms of use of the various social media platforms, one has to be of a certain age. It's 13 for some, 18 for others to sign up for an account. And the trouble is that verification works on the honor system, right? It's type in your birthday here, and that's it. And it's the same way we currently stop kids from logging on to such harmful websites as greygoose.com. Grey Goose, the vodka. But, unless someone on the marketing teams had a really bad day, no one's getting cyberbullied on greygoose.com. You can't buy drugs on greygoose.com. You can't even buy Grey Goose on greygoose.com. And where you can buy it, a liquor store, you need to show ID. So sure, while a kid can fake a birthday entry and look at pretty pictures of vodka bottles, I'm not sure that's necessarily the right strategy to stop them from logging on to, the internet cesspools. Various social media platforms. Problems. Freudian slip it. Accurate. But what then? Are we going to require ID verification to create an Instagram account? To create an account, not just to be verified, but to actually create one? I could see how, without thinking about it too much, a proposal like that might make enough sense to wind its way through some legislative drafting. But think about the effect on the platform, right? Your favorite meme account, gone. Your dog's account, unless your dog has a driver's license, gone. Your second or backup or family account, gone. And that would kind of suck, right? Also, think of the data processing requirements that would place on the platform operators, right? Not just in terms of servers and storage, but also regulatory compliance. GDPR, anybody? CCPA? And sure, while this might currently be happening for paid verified accounts on the platform, platforms like Instagram and Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it, I don't think that represents a sizable proportion of total users, right? On the other hand, I don't think a blame the parents approach here is right either. I'm not a parent yet, and I'm currently passing a kidney stone over the idea of having a kid with a smartphone. But there's just a lot of world out there on that device, and in a contrast between parental control settings and the ingenuity of kids, it's only stupid money that bets on the controls. Smart money's on the kids. So if you're waiting for me to drop a solution here, there's no joy. I've been thinking about this for a few days now and systematically torn through just about every idea I've had thus far. None of them are good. This issue is at the intersection of law and technology, and professionally, that's kind of where I live. So there'll be more on this for me. No promises on a solution, but this is the stuff that I do think about, and people actually pay me to think about. And no one's paying me to regulate or legislate, but if I can bring an industry perspective to kind of understanding these problems, future issues of Noisecutter Podcast and Newsletter, keep on the lookout, because that's where it'll be for me. All right, guys. And it's been a good one for this episode of the podcast. And again, subscribe, noisecutter.substack.com. You can go to noisecutter.com to access both the newsletter and the podcast. Subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Do the whole, like, comment, review thing. Yeah, cool. All right. Until next time, it's been real. Peace. The Noisecutter Podcast is a production of Titan Gray, LLC, and is hosted by me, Rex Chatterjee. If you found our podcast helpful and want to say thanks, please head over to your favorite podcast app, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever else, and give us a review, leave a comment, and hit that follow or subscribe button to stay up to date on the latest. For more about our guest or this episode, head over to our website, noisecutterpodcast.com, where you'll find contact info for our guest as well as links to some of the things we talked about on this episode. If you want to reach us directly, just send an email to info@noisecutterpodcast.com. This recording is a copyright of Titan Gray, LLC, with all rights reserved. This podcast may be construed as attorney advertising, and prior results do not guarantee a similar outcome. Nothing in this podcast should be construed as legal advice, and your listening to this podcast or contacting us about it does not form an attorney-client relationship. No affiliation or relationship, including an attorney-client relationship, exists between us and our guests unless otherwise stated. For full terms of use, please visit our website at noisecutterpodcast.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time here at Noisecutter.